Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today I want to tell you about a very brave and special lady called Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks. I want to tell you about who she was and what she did that was so brave. I've got a photo of her here, and you might see just behind her is someone I told you about in another assembly. This is Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks was very brave because she stood up for something she believed in. So Rosa was born in Alabama in America on February the 4th, 1913. And I'm telling you this on February the 4th, 2021. So over 100 years ago, Rosa Parks was born. Her mother was a teacher and her father was a carpenter. Her mum and dad split up when she was little, and so she went to live with her mum and her brother. Then she went to live with her grandma, and they went to school and went to church near the farm where her grandparents lived. So I'm going to tell you about something that's hard for us to imagine now, and it's segregation. The word segregation means being separate. Being segregated means you're being split. One group over here and one group over there. Now, when Rosa was little, she lived in America where people were segregated, where they were split between black people and white people. They weren't allowed to mix, so they always had to be separate. As a child, Rosa experienced a lot of racism and saw how black and white people were separated by law. Rosa attended a secondary school for black children, and only black children went to her secondary school, and they all had to walk there. White children went to a completely different school, and they were able to get the bus to their school, but they were always kept separate. And at this time in history, black people and white people were kept separate in America, and often the black people didn't get all the nice things to use and the nice places to go. That was only for white people, and that's very wrong. On a bus, there would always be separate places. The white people would sit at the front of the bus, and there were seats at the back of the bus for black people. At the bus stop, there was a line of black people and a line of white people, and the white people got to sit on a bench while they waited, whereas black people had to stand up and wait for their bus. Now, in 1955, after a long day at work, Rosa got on the bus and she sat in the first row of seats that were for black people. By the time the bus reached the third stop, the bus was full, and the white-only seats were all full. Rosa and 3 other black people were sitting at the back of the bus. The bus driver came to speak to those black people and asked them to move to make room for more white people to sit down. After being asked by the bus driver to move, the other black people did move, but Rosa refused. She would not move. The driver told Rosa that if she did not move, he would call the police. And she told him to do just that. So he did. So because Rosa wouldn't move, the bus driver called the police to report Rosa. Now, why didn't she move? Have a think. Why didn't Rosa move her seat? I know that she was tired of always being the one to have to move, to give in. She didn't like the fact that black people and white people were always separate. She wasn't especially tired that day from her work, but she was tired of having to move. She didn't think it was fair that she should have to move, and so she didn't. And Rosa wrote about this a long time later and said, "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I was not tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me being old to them. I was 42. No, I was tired of giving in." Now, the bus driver called the police and Rosa was arrested. The next day, her friends paid to get her out of prison and they organised a bus boycott. That means a boycott means that you refuse to do something. And so they organised a bus boycott so that to show their support for Rosa, black people would stop using the bus altogether. So Rosa was charged and fined with causing trouble, and the bus boycott started. So all the black people decided not to use the bus, just to show how important it was to work with Rosa, to support her, and they didn't want to be separate anymore. And some white people also stopped using the bus. For more than a year, 40,000 people did not use the bus in their city. They found other ways to get to work, or they would walk. And they wanted to show their support for Rosa. So not many people used the bus anymore, and that made everyone take notice. And not just in their city, but across America. Suddenly, something had to be done. Eventually, the government noticed and they passed laws to stop segregation on buses. And the boycott finally ended on December the 20th, 1956. So for over a year, people were not using the buses because they wanted to support Rosa. Segregation was in place in other parts of society, so white and black people could mix on the buses, but they were still separated in other areas, libraries, public toilets, parks. There were still white areas and black areas, but it was a start. It was a start to campaign for change so that black people were treated more fairly. Now, do you think everybody agreed with what Rosa was doing? Can you think of any groups that did not understand how Rosa was feeling? Not everybody in society agreed with Rosa, and I should imagine there were lots of white people that didn't want to think about how Rosa might have felt. There was still a lot of fighting about the laws being changed. Some white people bombed black people's churches and their homes, which is a horrible thing to have happened and a horrible thing for us to think about. Eventually, things calmed down. However, there was still a long way to go to change the attitudes of some people. And we saw that last summer with the Black Lives Matter. And it's really important that we treat everybody fairly. So let's remember Rosa who refused to get up and change spaces. She moved over to make room for someone to sit next to her. But in those days, it wasn't okay for a black person to sit next to a white person. That's really hard for us to imagine. But I really like the fact that Rosa stood up for what she believed in. She must have had to be very brave to say no, and know that the driver was going to report her to the police, that she was going to be put in prison overnight and made to pay a fine. She had to pay money just for saying, no, that's not fair. So I want to think about Rosa and times when we have to be brave. And Rosa said, you have to stand up for what's right. And I wanted to tell you about her today.